last story before we get into the leadership lessons from Luke and jump into the Bible for a moment. A good example of leadership. Well, pat on the back. Christians, we're A-OK, right? which is kind of good, because we do get a bit of a bashing a lot. But there was this article that I saw in the Washington Post. It really jumped out at me. When we're talking about AI a lot lately, and the ethics of AI, and are we gonna, like, Elon Musk actually talks about it a lot, that he's talking about that, AI is unethical, and the way it's been developed, and it's terrible, and like, so Elon's very anti what AI is, where AI is going. But there's some hope, and there was this article saying that Judeo-Christian roots will ensure US military AI is used ethically, General says. And then the article goes on to say that there's obviously, when we look at AI, there's all these opportunities for it to be used unethically. There's all these opportunities for it to take over us and do all these, like Skynet, right, from Terminator. Maybe eventually it will take over and all that sort of stuff. Like, there's all those fears, but the hope is the fact that the US military AI is, because it's rooted in Judeo-Christian values, it's obviously being coded and developed with values and with morals, I suppose you could say, which sets us apart. So when we are making decisions, I suppose what the kind of thing that jumped out at me about this topic for today, about how leaders make better decisions, or how we can make decisions as leaders, is, are we making decisions based on our Christian values? When you're in business, are you making your decisions right now? I know so many Christians in business that call themselves Christian business people, but they're not. They're just Christians that happen to do business. There's not a blend of their Christianity and business. Your Christianity, your values, your beliefs should actually be displayed in everything you do in business. And unfortunately, there's a lot of businesses I see that don't display those values. And so what I kind of get from this is, well, if even the military AI can prove to be better because it has Christian values, are you taking advantage of that in your business, in your leadership? You leading your church? Yeah, I know. A lot of church leaders don't lead in a Christian manner. Are you leading from your Christian values? Dr. Rod, how do we avoid being that person that is a Christian who runs a business, or is a Christian who is a leader, rather than being a Christian leader and a Christian business owner?
I'm kind of glad you asked. Look, I think the key really is what people now sometimes refer to as whole of life Christianity. In other words, Christianity, it's not something we do on Sunday or a Saturday, depending on our denominational affiliation. It's who we are, and we carry that with us 24/7. Now, a lot of the issues for Christians in business is they don't know how to be Christians in business. And look, it's the same way a lot of Christians don't know how to be Christians in their own workplace, in their job, and so on and so forth. And the church isn't teaching them either.
But why is that? Like, obviously you're saying the church isn't teaching it. Okay, so why is the church not teaching it?
Oh, look, I think one of the reasons is we've developed a kind of dualistic understanding of where religion fits. And so religion fits part of our life, and then the workplace.
From 9:30 to 11:30 on
Sunday. More or less. It's called the secular divide by the sacred secular divide by theologians. I think what we have to understand is that there is nothing in our life that can be separated into one or other of those boxes, because
Yes.
everything is sacred.
Yes.
As far as God is concerned, every thought, every word, every action of ours is sacred. And in fact, the Hebrew word avodah or avoda, depending on how you pronounce the transliteration of the original Hebrew, it can mean work, worship, or service. So there's a kind of etymological relationship among those three. So what we have to understand as decision makers in business is that as far as God is concerned, there's no separation between Sunday and Monday. There was a somewhat forgotten article published in the Harvard Business Review way back in 1964, I think it was, by Albert Carr. And he said this: if you try to carry your Christian, and I'm paraphrasing him, if you try to carry your Christian ethics into business, you're going to develop a nervous tick. And he did use the expression nervous tick because he said the two are incompatible. And maybe he had a point, but they have to be compatible. As Christians, we have to live an integrated life. We can't say, well, this is my spiritual life or my sacred life. This is where I fit with church, and then this is where I fit out there in the business world. We've got to develop an integrated life. We have to carry our Christian worldview with us, no matter where we happen to be. And that's a challenge. That can be a big challenge. That's why I'm the business pastor.
Yeah.
I sit with people in business and we talk these issues through.
Yeah, well, obviously you like this is your gifting, this is your calling, this is where you focus a lot of your attention, because you work with businesses' missions, and that's a big part of what you do, and why you mentor me and are my pastor. You mentioned about a worldview, like you're carrying that worldview. I think that kind of highlights an issue, is most people don't actually really understand what is their worldview. Their worldview obviously impacts them, like, because everything we do comes from our worldview, and we may not be aware of it, but we need to be consciously aware of what our worldview is, because I could almost hazard a guess that if you're not consciously aware of what your worldview is, maybe it's not completely a Christian worldview. Maybe if you're not, completely consciously aware of what your worldview is and what has influence. So here's how I kind of interpreted it when I first started studying about worldview. Was every experience we have, every interaction, every video we watch, podcast we listen to, book we read, all of those things, that we're all feeding on that information, and we're going, yep, I agree with that. No, I don't agree with that. And we kind of filter out what we agree with, what we don't agree with. Every interaction we have, we go, I didn't like that, so I don't agree with that, or I like that interaction, so I like that. And there's all these little pieces that actually make up our worldview. And if we're not consciously aware of what those things are that make up our worldview, it can be a skewed worldview. So a lot of people may think, oh, I'm a Christian, so I've got a Christian worldview. But what are all those experiences you've had that have made up the way you actually make your decisions, the way you value things, the way what you agree and disagree with? Maybe what you have is not completely a Christian worldview, or maybe it is a Christian worldview, but maybe you need to shift your perspective on things to actually be able to live out a full Christian worldview. So how do we manage our worldview there, Dr. Roy?
Well, first of all, we've got to be conscious of it. So we've got to know that we do have a worldview. Then we need to test its coherence. Do I hold a coherent
Yes.
worldview? And I think for a lot of people, they don't. And look, put very simply, your worldview is the way in which you process information and experience. How you it's the way in which you understand the world around you.
Yeah.
And obviously, we want Christians who own businesses, for example, Christians who are leaders in whatever context, to align with a biblical worldview. So if you take something like the the second of the great commandments, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So how does a coherent Christian worldview use that as an operating principle in the context of the human resources management function of your business?
Yeah.
How does that work? And I used to teach this. I won't take 40 minutes to go through it now, but you can certainly apply a Christian worldview in that context. How does my Christian worldview apply to me as an entrepreneur? Well, go to Genesis 1:1. That tells you who owns everything. So what that means is you're actually acting as a steward for God. So that might change the way in which you relate to other people. You're not actually the big or powerful or mighty or knowing boss that you might have thought you were. God is, and you're working with him as a co-creator. And the objective of that co-creation is that human beings will flourish. So the product that you produce should in some way, shape or form add something positive to the people who purchase the product. But people who come and work for you should get something positive from it. You know, one of the reasons for our salvation and for redemption of the world is that work, despite the fact that after the fall it was supposed to be full of drudgery, we've been redeemed from the drudgery of work. So if I'm an entrepreneur, if I'm a senior manager in a business or whatever, so what do I do to remove drudgery from work? And you know what? That was the kind of thing that drove someone like Cyrus McCormack to develop the mechanical reaper. He was heavily influenced by his father. They were farmers, they were slave owners, but his father was always trying to invent devices that would reduce the drudgery of farm labouring, which was done at that time by slaves. That eventually drove Cyrus McCormack to develop the mechanical reaper, which removed a lot of drudgery out of agricultural work. So your Christian worldview needs to permeate everything you do. And it's complex, but you cannot, you will develop a nervous tick if you try to compartmentalize everything. So, well, this is who I am on Sundays and on Wednesday nights when I'm with my home group, but this is who I am when I'm in business. But I'm constantly surprised by the stories I hear of Christians in business who don't seem to mind cheating people. Somehow or other, they seem to think, well, that's all part of the rough and tumble of competition. But let me tell you something, and this relates to the free leadership course. When God gives you a purpose, when you are heading towards the fulfillment of the purpose that God has given you, God has given your business, there's no competition.
Yes.
See, there isn't competition in the kingdom of God. So when you're onto the kingdom purpose, and I believe every business has a God-given kingdom purpose. And one of the things I do is help people in business find out what it is. When you're there, you don't have to worry about competition. In fact, you can help your competitors. My grandfather was a farmer. All the farmers in the district used to get together and help one another at planting time and harvesting time, when there were fires, when there were fences to build. Now, in a sense, they were competing with one another to get the best crops. And incidentally, that's why we used to have agricultural shows in every small rural community in Australia. And they have, I think they may call them agricultural fairs in America and Canada. But That was when you had your competition. Who could grow the biggest tomatoes,
Pumpkin.
the biggest pumpkins, the highest yielding crops of wheat and so on. But they used to cooperate together. So look, honestly, we've got the wrong model. And I think we've inherited that through Darwinian evolution, this idea of the survival of the fittest. And when we say it's only the fit who survive, then we start compromising on moral positions and say, well, I've got to be fit to survive. And so our goal becomes
also
out-competing everybody else.
Yeah, and also some people take that further of like, well, for me to survive, that means I need to make sure that someone is unfit
Exactly.
so that they don't survive.
It means I've got to knock out my competition.
Yep.
I don't think that's how the kingdom of God operates.
No.
When you're on purpose, you don't have to worry about competition. There are lots of other things you need to worry about.
Yes.
And look, you may have to worry about competition as in the sense that the people who are in your market are not always going to act ethically either, and I've seen plenty of examples of that. I won't recount any because I don't want to wind up in court. But the thing is this: when you're on God's purpose, you're going to be a winner.
Yeah.
So put a lot of effort into figuring out just what has God assigned you to do. If you're in business or if you're a leader elsewhere, what is it that God has assigned you to do? And I'll tell you what, you'll sleep better when you know it as well.
And one thing I really liked there was about you talking about it being congruent. No, what was the word that you said?
Coherent.
Coherent.
Yeah.
I really liked that because there are so many people that they have particular worldviews, but they act or they say things that they like. So, for example, if you have the worldview, if you have a Christian worldview, you should, like you say, love your neighbor. But there's so many leaders that are just constantly talking down about their people, saying, "Oh, people suck." Actually, I was joking about this with one of my clients today. They've just one of their staff members, we've had to let them go, and they said they realized that because one of their core values as a business is relationship, but they realized that over time there was these little comments that this staff member kept making of like, "I hate people suck," like they had this real negative perspective of people. And the thing is so many leaders say those things. So many leaders, like there's no congruence with you having a Christian worldview of loving people, but then you actually thinking that people just get in your way, people are dumb, people are stupid, like you hate people, like that is incongruent. And I'll admit, I find myself in that situation sometimes that I have to kind of check myself and go, hang on a sec, that's not loving people like God has called us to love people. Hey, you've just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership Podcast. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If it challenged your leadership or inspired you in some way, put a comment below. And if you want to watch the full episode or more content like this, check out our channel. And hey, consider subscribing while you're there.